Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode on the show, Hidden Secrets in Books. And you guys know I only bring the best of guests to my show. I make sure to take out my time to go out there and sort out for the best guests to bring for you guys on the show. And once again, today we have a very special guest. And as always, our guest today is an author. Today's guest is Valerie Greene. Valerie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dominic. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Valerie. So I would like you to introduce yourself to my audience.
Great. So, I am a relationship coach and I've been coaching for over 20 years. And I help both women and couples to attract and reignite and sustain lasting love. And I did write a book called Commitment Roadmap. So of course, I'm happy to talk about that, but I'm also happy to talk about other books that have influenced my coaching and how I help others. My book is about how to get really clear about how to avoid situationships and date strategically to find somebody that is truly aligned with the kind of vision for passionate partnership that you deserve, and how to inspire commitment to lifelong love. I also have an online course where I teach couples that are fighting, and the course is written for the woman in the relationship, inspire the man in the relationship, deep intimacy and both emotional intimacy mostly. But of course, I also love working with couples with so many resources to teach people secure attachment, so to transform conflict into intimacy and deeper connection.
All right. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. So I have some questions here for you, Valerie, and I would like us to get into them.
Great.
Okay. So what first led you to specialize in helping people build healthier and more connected relationships?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's really my own personal journey that got me passionate about helping people attract and sustain lasting love. Because although my parents had a harmonious relationship, I argued with my father constantly. And all I really learned was how to solve problems through arguing, because that's the way that we solve problems. And, I mean, it normally didn't work to solve problems. It was like his way or the highway. So I was really scared of conflict, and I brought that fear into my relationships in my 20s. So I would kind of sweep conflict under the rug and it was fine. And then obviously it wasn't. So eventually I would kind of blow up and start an argument. And because I didn't have any better skills, I would, just argue constantly with my boyfriends and kind of wash, rinse, repeat until I realized I was the common denominator. And I didn't know why my relationships would start out break us over out of anger. So that really started me being passionate about how to sustain lasting. That was really my passion in my 20s. And so I started coaching in 2005 as a health coach, but it became pretty apparent that because it was my personal mission to learn about relationships, that's what I wound up helping my clients with the most. And so then I was in pretty much continuous training for the next 10 years about I went to the Relationship Coaching Institute and also studied with the philosophies of Sue Johnson and John Gottman and emotionally focused therapy, which they let me do as a coach. And so I applied all of the tools that I was learning to the single and coupled clients that I had, and started getting really amazing results in them being able to avoid their own pitfalls, both in dating the wrong people and in transforming conflict into deeper connection. And that's what led me to write my own book, because of the same advice that I was giving to clients over and over again. I mean, coaching, as you know, is not giving advice. It's helping clients to integrate their own, to learn the skills and, to find their own answers and their own wisdom and to learn how to have the skills to have less. But of course, within that, I would teach skills. And so I was teaching the same skills over and over again. And that is what really um, became the backbone of the book and my online course. And so now, of course, I really prefer the one-on-one work because I love helping people with their unique situations. But I love that I can offer the book and the online course for people that can't afford one-on-one work, or they want to learn more about my style in order to want to work with me.
Okay.
And of course, that complete my personal journey. I mean, now I'm happily married, of course, so I'm happy to talk more about that too.
Okay. So, okay, go on. If you're happy to talk more about that, then you can share that with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, the story around my marriage is actually pretty cool because when I met my husband, he said that he didn't want to get married. And so that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things that inspired me to write my book, which is called The Commitment Roadmap. And it was around really because he was scared, since relationships that he'd been in the past felt like kind of a burden to him. And he was scared of feeling bogged down and losing his freedom. And so I really had to show him actually that being with me would allow him to feel more part of who he really was and to live his purpose in life than if he wasn't with me. And so it was after a few years of being together that he realized that he couldn't live without me. And, that's why I actually, in the book, he said, you've so beyond blown away my doubts to committing to you. Like a bulldozer over matchsticks, obliterated them just by being who you are. So I really love that part of the story. And now, of course, it's not like we don't have our issues, but we use all the tools that I teach in order to work through that. And he kind of says that being with me, like people ask him, what's it like to be married to a relationship coach? It's kind of like, oh, it's great. It's like driving in a car with a passenger seat. If thing breaks down, she knows how to fix it. So I think that's cute.
So, Valerie, don't you think because you are a relationship coach, there are times whereby you're trying to shun your partner's opinion because you feel you know better?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Do you say that
I
it's
said, don't you think because you are a relationship coach, there are times where you tend to shun your partner's opinion because you think you know better than him?
oh I wouldn't. I mean, of course, I I might have my blind. Of course, I have my blind spots. Um, but I think I do a pretty good job of living that adage that you could either be right or you can be happy. So I never think that I know better than him. And really, what I do is I'm curious about his point of view, and I really do live by that teaching that needs versus strategies. So what that means is that if he has a different point of view than me, I can validate his point of view because his point of view is that I guess I would have to choose a particular conflict to talk about how I would demonstrate this. Um, so one of the recurring things that is an issue between us is time, and because we're both entrepreneurs. So a lot of times it's like actually right now his business takes more time than mine does because he's getting a new business off the ground. And so a lot of times he doesn't have time for me the way that I would want him to. And he's busy when I would want to plan a date night every week or whatever. And so um if I was to make him wrong for that, then he would get defensive and don't you see what I'm doing this for us and blah, blah, blah. So I do think that, I mean, in terms of needs versus strategies, it's like his need is focus in the business. Um, his strategy around that is time. But if my need is deep connection, we can always make time to connect in a deep way, even if it's not as much time as I want. So I can still validate that he has to focus on the business and say, okay, my need is deep connection. Um, so can we at least connect for a half hour a day in a deep way and talk about the most meaningful part of our day together? And then I am going to feel connected enough because it's quality over quantity. And then, of course, we do make time to go out together, but it's just not as much as I would want. So that's the philosophy that I bring to all of my couples, is that if you go deep enough in the conversation, then it's not about being right. It's about figuring out what do you most need, and what would that provide for you? What experience are you looking to have, and how can you have that experience even if it's not in the particular way that you want? Because it's not about want on the outside, it's about the experience that we want to have on the inside that matters.
Okay, so Valerie, thank you so much. Tell us, you often talk about emotional attunement. What does that mean, and why is it so important for lasting love?
Thank you. Yeah. So attunement is kind of like learning how to listen beneath the words that people are saying to the experience that they're having, and to kind of be able to um, connect to that experience. So, for example, let's say we are in that argument. I'll use that one because a lot of times that is what we wind up arguing about is time. And so if he's saying that, the words on the surface are that he's really beat down and, like he's frustrated that he's not um, experiencing as much progress as he wants to be, I could listen to that on an intellectual level, and maybe it would make me scared of the only thing that I did was listen on an intellectual level. And if we're talking about books, I think the book that really validates what I'm saying the most is called How to Improve Your Marriage Without Talking About It by Patricia Love and Stephen Jonesy. Because it explains in that book that women want to hear men's feelings. And I understand I'm talking about women and men. I think that this equally applies to any gender with masculine energy and feminine energy, which all of us have inside of us. So the masculine energy partner and the feminine energy partner, they have kind of different reactions to things, whereas the feminine energy partner usually cares more about how things feel, and the masculine energy partner cares more about um, how having their thoughts validated, and they respond to things with thought. And all of us have both parts within us. So, but that book talks about men and women, and so I want to say that because I know that today's world has a lot more variety of genders than we used to think, and I value that. So, anyways, but that book explains that when a woman wants his feelings, that if he shared, like, what she means usually is like she wants to know his feelings towards her in a more romantic way. But if a man says, "Well, actually, I feel really angry or really scared about something," and she's like, "Oh, no, no, not those feelings," right? Because she doesn't always know how to handle them, right? So it's like that's what I do when I hold space for couples is I help them to go deeper and hold space for each other's feelings, which is what attunement is learning how to understand the deeper experience that the person's having. So if my husband explains on the surface that maybe he's concerned or kind of beaten down, that might scare me, right? Because then I don't necessarily feel held by him. So attunement means that I'm going deeper than that. I'm able to hold space for my own fear so that I can really drop the experience that he's having. And oh, got it. So you're just feeling frustrated that things are going slower than you expected. Tell me more about that. What's that like for you? And once I heard what it's like for him, we actually had a conversation about this yesterday. I was able to reframe it for him and say, "Oh my gosh, you're like on your own personal odyssey." Because we didn't really, we haven't seen the movie that just came out, The Odyssey, but it's obviously a very well known story, and it's the main character spends 20 years like um, experiencing all these challenges to get to his goal, and so I hope to bring it because I really got it. It's like, oh wow, this is the experience you're having, and this is the archetype that you're in. And I know that it feels frustrating, but it is a hero's journey arc that you're really living, and I commend you for it. And so it's not what he was saying on the surface. I was able to grasp the meaning and symbolism that he was expressing, and that made him feel really deeply seen and moved and inspired closer to it. And so that's what it means to attune to what someone's saying. It's not just hearing the words that they're saying on the surface. It's actually really getting the deeper feeling, the deeper values, and the deeper metaphors and archetypes that they're embodying, and making them feel really seen and heard. And when that can happen in a romantic relationship, then that's actually what I mean about the quality versus quantity. Because if you can really get each other on a deeper level, then that's even more powerful than spending the whole day together when you're connecting in a superficial way.
Okay, so Valerie, transform your own relationship patterns before helping others. What was the biggest lesson you learned about love?
Yeah. Um, I would say the biggest lesson I learned about love, and this was a lesson that I learned. It's funny. I actually learned this lesson in my first marriage. So it's just if I spent the whole time talking about my story, then that would take the whole interview. So I was married before, in my 30s. Now I'm 47. So um, I'm happily married now. But in my 30s, I was with my ex-husband, and I really learned this lesson with him because I thought that I had to be strong instead of vulnerable. And I thought that love was about me being independent and him being independent and choosing each other because we liked being together, and had fun together. And of course, I thought that it was about shared purpose and shared values and, all of this. But I thought that I had to be strong. And it's not like, I mean, obviously we do have to be strong as well, right? It's not about being weak. But I really learned that vulnerability is not weakness, that vulnerability takes a lot of courage. And if I can come from a vulnerable place, meaning that I'm telling him that I'm sad or that I'm scared or that, I have a deeper longing for something, that I thought, based on my own childhood, that revealing that was going to have him think that I was weak. And that's why I got caught in cycles of recurring conflict, because I was scared of being vulnerable. But then, of course, then that was what caused me to kind of have a one-up position, like you talked about in the beginning, in my marriage, where it wasn't that I thought I had to be right, but I thought that I had to be strong. And so with my ex-husband, I didn't show my vulnerability, and therefore I wasn't comfortable with his vulnerability. So when he said this, and this is my current husband, I think now I'm good at holding space for vulnerable feelings. But back then, if my ex-husband showed that he was scared about something, I would actually lose respect for him. And it was because I was judging my own vulnerability. So if he was scared about something, I would try to take him out of it. I would try to be like, no, don't be scared. Look at it like this way instead, and I would try to reframe it for him right away, without really without attuning to him and what he needs, like this previous example with my husband now, that I can attune to him and what he needs in that moment and help reframe it for him. But I would jump there to begin with, right, in my previous marriage. Now what I'm saying is like I hold space for his feelings and I validate his perspective and I ask how he wants to be with it and what that's like for him and I can handle it because I can handle my own vulnerability. But in the past, in my previous relationship, I still regret this, but my ex-husband and I repaired all of that, and now we're on good terms. But back then, I would act in a way where I couldn't be with his fear, trust it, and I would be like, "No, don't be scared. Look on the bright side instead," or "No, I don't want you to feel that way. Feel this way instead." Like I would judge him, and then of course we would argue, and he would feel unseen and he would feel judged, and then he would try to stand up for himself, and then I would argue with him, and that relationship was actually where I learned how to hold space for someone. So it's one way in which my ex-husband and I are still on good terms, because when I was with him, I would recognize that I had to really learn how to resolve conflict on a deeper level. So I became a teacher of nonviolent communication back then, because I was doing relationship coaching back then. I was more working with singles back then, not couples, because now I'm qualified to work with couples after everything I learned. But back then, I was just working with singles to teach them how to date in a strategic way and how to, really attract high quality men. Work with women to attract high quality men. Because my ex husband was a really good person, and he still is. We just were not aligned with our visions for what we both wanted. And now my current husband and I are. That's good. I learned a lot. But when I was with my ex-husband, I mastered nonviolent communication enough to teach it. And I actually started teaching it. And what that is that it's a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, it's also called compassionate communication because it's about how to be known and how to share your deeper feelings and needs, and how to really listen and have empathy for someone else's feelings and needs. And so when I was with my ex-husband, and I was learning it, this was before there were a lot of apps, because I got divorced in 2013. Back then, there weren't a lot of apps for the phones, so I actually hung a sheet of feelings and needs on my wall in the living room. And I would take a time out when we were arguing and I'd go look at the list. And then I would come back and I would give him empathy for his needs, and I would share my deeper feelings and needs. And that's how I really learned how to be vulnerable. And I learned that sharing my vulnerable feelings and listening to his vulnerable feelings actually solved us arguing. And we learned how to validate each other's points of view and see if we could find a win-win solution that way. And I really got a lot of practice with my ex-husband in healing my blocks to unconditional love, where then I no longer judged him for feeling sad or scared because I could handle my own sadness and fear. And then we actually did have a lot of deep connection. And it was through that process that we were able to determine that we were things. But, and we stopped arguing. But, this is what I teach couples now, that just because you're stopping arguing doesn't mean that you're meant to be together. And maybe it means that you're supposed to choose a different path. But if you choose a different path out of anger or resentment, then you're probably going to repeat that same pattern with the next person, because you haven't really learned the skills to stop arguing and figure out what you both want. So it makes sense to learn those skills, unless you're in an abusive relationship or with somebody who's a narcissist or something that is highly toxic or unhealthy. Then it makes sense to break up with anger or resentment. You need to take care of yourself. But if you're just arguing or you've grown apart, then in my opinion, it makes sense to learn how to work through those issues now and have the skills so that maybe things will get better between you. Because if you're with somebody now and it's not working out, It might be because they're also getting triggered by you. And if you're judging how they're showing up, that might be because they're not acting the way that they did in the beginning because they're reacting to getting triggered by you and you're reacting to getting triggered by them. And so you're not really showing each other who you are at your best. So it makes sense to learn how to work through that. So then you are showing each other who you are at your best. And once you work through that, then maybe things can work out between you. And that's the only way that you'll ever know. So that was really what I learned in my previous marriage, that I could have a really harmonious connection now.
All right, Valerie, thank you so much. I really enjoyed listening to your story. So, what daily habits can we practice to help us have strong and emotionally secure relationships?
Yeah. So daily habits, is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Because I think it's important to have daily habits with oneself as well as with one's partner. And so I'm really talking about the ones with yourself, I think are important for everyone, including singles. Because a lot of people think that if I'm not in a relationship, then I don't really have to pay attention to um, the same things as if I was. But I would say that if you want to be in a relationship, even eventually, then it makes sense to get in the habits now with yourself of what's important to do if you're in a relationship. So I think this applies to both singles and couples, but obviously, um, only half of it does. So first we'll start with what to do yourself. So I think this is also what I teach to singles, that it's really important to have two things, two daily habits. Number one is to be able, they say that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That's a saying in the coaching world, and I think that applies to relationships too. And I don't mean that you plan your day out logistically. What I mean is that you know the vision, the culture that you want to create. And that goes with yourself too. For example, how do you want your day to go in terms of it being fulfilling? What practices do you have to do on a daily basis to keep yourself in your own zone of excellence? Meaning, like for me, that includes not just like taking care of my physical health by working out, etc., eating healthy, going to sleep, but also my emotional health. Meaning, I need to be really attuned to myself on a daily basis. And if I'm feeling wonderful, then I take time to appreciate that. But if I'm feeling off, like if I'm feeling sad or if I'm feeling scared or if I'm feeling upset, I don't just believe my negative story. I take time to slow down and challenge my limiting beliefs, get myself to a level of perspective, and give myself empathy for my feelings and ask myself what I need from myself. Like maybe I need to give myself compassion or empathy or nurturing. Or what do I need from the people in my life and how can I request that? And so I think that practice is really important to do with oneself, whether you're single or whether you're in a relationship. Because when you're in a relationship, if you don't do that, then you are at risk of either growing apart because you just stay on the surface, or a lot of times I'll talk to people that say they lose themselves in a relationship. And this is how you don't lose yourself in a relationship with someone else. And you maintain healthy differentiation so that you don't get enmeshed or codependent, so that you're really attuning to what you need, so that you're not just blaming the other person if you're not getting what you need. And so that's the practice that I think is important to do with yourself. And then if you're coupled, if you're in a partnership, a committed partnership, then I think what's really important to do on a daily basis with your partner is to make time to connect about the most important parts of your day. And because a lot of times couples will grow apart. And I completely understand that, because a lot of times people have busy jobs and they have kids, and they have, maybe you're taking care of aging parents, or maybe you have other obligations. And a lot of times couples will only connect about logistical things, and then the romance dies because you're kind of acting like business partners instead of romantic partners. So I think it's really important on a daily basis to make time to ask each other questions that are on a more emotional level. Meaning, you can ask, like, what was the best part of your day? Or, what are you proud of that you accomplished today? Or, what are you struggling with that you could use my support with? Or, what is something that was the most meaningful part of your day that you want me to see you for? Or, is there anything that you need from me right now to feel supported? Or is there anything that you want to share with me that you want me to give you your validation or support for? And that's how we really maintain this culture of secure attachment with each other, where we're really being a secure base for each other to come back to, where we know that we're going to be seen for what's most important, things that help us to feel like we're on the same team. And it really doesn't have to take that long. That's the kind of thing that I say that if my husband is really busy right now, we always make at least 30 minutes per day to talk about with each other so that we feel like we're deeply connected. And I understand that if you have kids, it's really hard to carve out that time. But, when I work with couples that are really busy, maybe you only have time to do that conversation once a week or once every few days. But I think it's really important for that. And then the other thing that I say it's important to do is have rituals leading and arriving. So even if you're super busy, you could always make like give each other a hug when you leave and come back together. If if one person leaves for work earlier, that they like hug the other person and say goodbye. And then they, or if you don't want to hug, at least like greet each other as soon as you get home. And sometimes people need transition time where they're not ready to be bombarded with like problems when they first come home, but it's good to have a ritual where you're at least saying hello and it's nice to see you, before you go off. And, I really need time to kind of be by myself before I'm ready to things. But I talk about rituals of like, at least because, there's so many people that they don't really interact with each other. And especially when you have busy lives, it's so important. Even if you spend 30 seconds to greet each other when you leave or arrive, I think that makes a huge difference in terms of building secure attachment.
Okay, so thank you so much, Valerie. So if you could leave every couple with one piece of relationship wisdom, what would it be?
Thank you. Yeah, I would say that what is the most important in any relationship is that concept of attunement, because that's the one thing that we can have with our romantic partner that's hard to have with anyone else. A lot of us have that with our friends, but not everyone does. And so what I mean is that it's important that you take time both with you and your partner to look at what you most deeply value in life. What makes your life most meaningful? What is it that you have to be experiencing on a regular basis in order for life to feel fulfilling, and that you really validate that for each other, and that you make time to keep checking in about that? Because what I notice is that a lot of arguments happen because we don't feel like we're important to each other. And we don't feel like we're important to each other because we're not taking the time to find out what's the most meaningful part of our week or our year or our life. Because our lives are so busy, and a lot of times we just get lost in the weeds of what's logistical and everything that needs to get done. And so if we do that, though, a lot of times we wind up arguing just because we don't feel important to each other and we don't feel like it's a priority. So if we can just recognize that underneath every argument is a deeper value that one's offered. You know, like for me, as I shared earlier, that value, if I'm arguing around not having enough time, it's about being deeply connected. It's not about time. It's about that feeling of deep connection. And so if we can take time to know, to ask deeper questions, like I encourage people to be like a 5-year-old and, you know, keep asking, oh, okay, what would that provide for you? And if you had that, what would that provide for you? And if you had that, what would that provide for you? Until you really get to the experience that the other person and validate that. I think that's what a lot of arguments are about. And we wind up defending ourselves and explaining our point of view and trying to be right instead of really finding out what's the experience that's most important to me and what's the experience that's most important to you. And if we can have that attitude, then that really is what I do with couples. I help them validate for each other. I find that that really takes care of 70% of arguments, and you can have a lot more harmony that way.
All right. Thank you so much, Valerie. This has been so exciting so far. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and reminding us that healthy relationships aren't built by avoiding conflicts. They are built by learning how to navigate it with honesty, compassion, and emotional connection. Your insights show that lasting love isn't about finding the perfect partner, but about creating a relationship where both people feel seen, held, and valued. So, for those that would like to connect with you and learn more about what you do, how can they do that?
Thank you. Yeah, so my website is coachvaleriegreene.com. So that's CoachValerie.com. So there's me at the end of Green. And so you can learn more about my book and my online course on there. It's under products, the products tab. And I also have a lot of free gifts. I have 4 free gifts if you go to the free ebooks training tab. Whether you're single or in a committed relationship, or whether you just want emotional healing, I have, you know, there's a scroll down menu, and I have shorter 20-page books and a video training if you want to get to know more about my work. And then I also have a lot of blogs, and I host my own podcast too called Soul Shaking Up. So you can learn all about that on my website, coachvaleriegreene.com.
All right. Thank you so much once again, Valerie. I really appreciate you coming here to teach us about relationship as well. So, my audience out there, I just want to thank you guys. You are the reason why we are able to do this. Make sure to check out Valerie's work. And if this episode is speaking to you, share it to someone out there who might need to hear this. I love you all so much, and I will see you guys again on the next episode. Thank you, Valerie, for coming to my show.
Thank you, Dominic. This has been really fun. Thank you. Yeah, I'll do that right now. So thanks so much for your time. Okay.